Hello and welcome to the Forbes India Show. I'm Shireen Bhan and we're in conversation with Google's Nikesh Arora. Nikesh, appreciate you joining us on the Forbes India Show. Let me start by asking you not about Google, but about what's happening as far as the industry is concerned. And I want to draw your attention to a debate that's taking place in the Valley and on account of what David Einhorn of Green Capital Light has had to say on whether we're in the midst of a second tech bubble in the last 15 years or not. And he says what is uncertain is how much further the bubble can expand and what might pop it. Where do you stand on whether we are in the midst of a bubble or we're not?
Well, I don't know about valuations and bubbles, but I think it's fair to say we are in the midst of a phenomenal user revolution. I think the pace of innovation has never been faster. And part of the reason that the pace of innovation is fast is because for the first time, you have access to global platforms which are used by not millions but billions of people, which are consistent. So if you can develop something interesting which can sit on a smartphone, it's going to be used by hundreds of millions of people around the world. And there was no business possibility in the past that allowed you to do anything which you could scale so rapidly. So I think the pace of innovation, the ability for people to innovate, the amount of capital available for innovation, the amount of risk capital out there, definitely creates the opportunity for people to go out there.
But does it justify the valuations? $19 billion for WhatsApp, does it justify those kind of valuations? Because the debate once again is bordering on whether the balance sheets support these kind of valuations or not at this point in time.
Well, so yeah, that's the good news is that people like yourselves and financial types get to understand valuation. From my perspective, you know, getting user enthusiasm, getting lots of people to use certain services and get excited about them definitely has value. Now, how much value you ascribe to it depends also on your position and what you believe you can make out of something. So I suspect different people have different value for companies out there. But I'd say the user revolution is live, and it is going to continue. And I don't think that's about to stop. And I think a lot more money is going to go help, support, invest, and make those things happen.
So what worries you about what we're seeing today?
I'm not worried. I'm excited because you know, you could say that as a large company now in the internet space, a lot of bad ideas will get funded because money is chasing a lot of interesting deals. But from our perspective, the more money that is out there that allows entrepreneurs to innovate, it just means that we get more innovation. And that's the exciting part. The fear is that if people perceive this to be a bubble and money goes out of the system, you're actually going to get less ability for people to innovate, which is a bad thing.
So let me ask you about what's happening at Google at this point in time. We just saw your results. The street wasn't particularly excited. You missed both the EPS estimates as well as the revenue estimates as far as the consensus was concerned. You have spoken about how you expect rates as far as the mobile side is concerned to go up significantly, and you believe that this is just the beginning of the journey as far as advertisers on the mobile platform are concerned. Explain to us what that means.
Well, let's decouple the financial numbers on a quarterly basis from the longer-term trends. I don't think there's anything fundamentally that has changed in our aspirations and what we're doing for the end user. So in terms of the mobility part, and if you think about it, you know, when you have a mobile phone and you start doing a search or you start looking for something, you get a lot more context, and we understand the location, we understand what you might be thinking. If you search for coffee at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and you're around 5 different coffee shops, the ability for us to give you a sense of where the next one is or get the coffee shop interested in that user is a lot higher than if you and I were sitting in our offices on our desktop and doing the search. So all I'm saying is, using that example, there are so many different situations where context and location adds so much information to that transaction, to that ability, that advertisers would want to engage with that user.
It also adds volumes, but it's not necessarily making a big jump as far as the price is concerned that you're being able to charge today.
Well, no, but I think if you think about it, advertising right today, we get paid for effective advertising. If somebody clicks on an ad, you get paid. You know, those click rates are still in the single digits. But if you have more information about the users, more understanding of what their context is, more than likely they would find more advertising more relevant. So if you increase the relevance, you definitely increase the ability to monetize.
So, you know, when you said that this is the start of the journey and that things can only get better, give me a sense of the timeline, because as far as your cost per click is concerned, and this has been not just a Google problem, but an industry-wide problem, as you graduate towards smartphones, what happens to volumes, what happens to prices?
I think, look, at this point in time, it's sort of like drinking from a fire hose. I think nobody out there expected so many users to move to mobile so fast. I think volumes are going through the roof. I also believe a lot of businesses did not understand that users would create this shift so fast. So you have a lot of supply. You have a lot of people searching on mobile devices. You have a lot of people spending a lot of time on mobile devices. And you need to make sure that businesses are capable, get ready, and start wanting to interact with these users in an intelligent way. So can we get users to advertisers? Of course we can. This is what we do. Are advertisers already enabled that they can actually take a mobile user and turn that into a useful interaction? Not every one of them. Definitely not as many as there are on the desktop side. So I think part of this also requires the advertisers, the businesses out there to create meaningful mobile experiences that when you and I go to their website or their mobile app, that we have a satisfying experience, and that becomes a way of interacting with that business in the future. It's definitely happening on the consumer side. You see tons and tons of beautiful mobile apps that people use, whether it's games, whether it's messaging apps, or whether it's apps for news, etc. What it needs to happen is that businesses need to spend more time enabling their businesses or their their transaction capability, their interaction with individual users. And as that happens, I think the value of that traffic continues to rise over time. So I don't think it's a matter of it's a matter of when.
But what happens now to your cost per click? Because that has been coming down, flat quarter on quarter, down 9% year on year. What do you estimate now?
Oh, I wouldn't dare to estimate. I'm sure there are many
not
smarter
for the next
people
quarter,
who would,
not for the next
who would
quarter.
estimate that. Look, I think, as I said to you, I think the trend is our friend. We have a lot more people searching on mobile devices. I'd much rather have that than not have that. I think that fundamentally provides a better value proposition in our ability to monetize that. I think I'd much rather have that. And I think the rest is a matter of execution and mechanics, and we'll get there.
There was a lot of talk on why you decided to dump Motorola after you just bought it. A $12.9 billion deal. You sold it for about $3 billion, a little under that. Is there a radical change as far as your strategy is concerned? What was the reason behind giving up on Motorola as quickly as you did?
I'm very excited about what is going on with Motorola. Motorola has not had a success to the scale of its Razr as they've had recently with their Moto G products. So they've done really well. We took a business which was going through its trials and tribulations. We worked hard as a management team. We have a streamlined business which now is generating beautiful devices, lots of innovation with a small, lean team. And I think we've done a lot of hard work in the last 18 months. Yes, we did pay for that transaction. I think if you look at the estimates out there in the math, actually it didn't end up losing a lot of money for us. Any money, we actually think it was a great deal. We got a lot of patents in the process.
And the majority of them you continue to license out now to Lenovo.
Yes, we do. But I think it was important to make sure that we have patents because we are squarely in the mobility space and we intend to be there. So the patents are useful.
Do you acknowledge that maybe it was too deep into the hardware space? Because then how do you reconcile that with the acquisition of Nest Lab?
I don't think it was too deep in the hardware space. I think what we did was we understand hardware really well. It was important for us, for our Android strategy, to make sure that the OEM ecosystem stays healthy, and there are many different producers of great hardware for Android devices. And I think Motorola is definitely in a much stronger place now than it was 18 months ago. I think they're going to have a fantastic future with Lenovo, which has strengthened both teams. So we're not unhappy with the transaction at all and what has happened with Motorola.
So what was the driver for giving it up?
I think what's interesting is if you think about the hardware space, the handset space, it is a category where there's a lot of innovation. There are a lot of different players out there. And I think what we're realizing, it's much more fun and interesting to innovate in a category that doesn't exist and try and build a brand new market than be in a market where there are a lot of players already.
Which is commoditized.
I don't think it's commoditized. Commoditized implies that there is no differentiation, but in our minds there's phenomenal differentiation between the OEMs and their hardware capabilities. And what is interesting is because of having multiple strong OEMs, the pace of innovation again in the hardware space, in the handset space, in the Android ecosystem is much faster.
So what is going to be driving inorganic strategy for you? We've just seen the $3.2 billion Nest Lab deal. We've seen titanium. So is it really going to be this effort to create new niches, new markets, new categories, virgin territory, so to speak?
See, I think what's interesting is that we don't sit back and think about revenue growth or inorganic, organic growth. We think about the fact, how can we keep creating beautiful user products that a lot of people want to use, billions of people, if not hundreds of millions. And in that process, we hopefully alight on great user experiences and technologies that a lot of people want to use. If that happens, we're sure we'll find a way of monetizing that in some way, shape, or form in the future. But if you go back and look at the history of Google, that's how Larry and Sergey started the company.
Yeah.
They set out to build the best search engine in the world. They didn't set out to build the most monetizable mechanism for data on the internet. So they did that. followed up with buying something like YouTube.
How do you balance that? Because you report your numbers every quarter, and if you miss estimates, people are going to ask you questions. So how do you balance the fact that you need to create a monetizable business, at the same time you want to be at the cutting edge of technology, you want to be at the cutting edge of innovation, and you want to be at the cutting edge of not missing out on a future product or a future category? How do you balance these two? And this is a dilemma that most companies are faced with today.
Well, so far it seems to be working. So far it seems to be okay that we build products for the end user and we figured out ways of monetizing them in the future. You know, if we had taken your approach of trying to figure out how we're going to grow organically or inorganically from a revenue perspective, we may never have done Android. And I'll tell you what, I think we're way better off today as a company with Android than we would have been without Android. Or we may never have bought YouTube, because when we bought YouTube, it wasn't quite clear how YouTube was going to make money. We knew that it was a huge user phenomenon. People were going to go spend time watching videos because entertainment is sort of the core of everything we do. And we knew that there was going to be unlimited bandwidth in the long-term future for every user out there. So if you understand that there's a technology trend that is your friend, you understand there's a user trend that is riding a technology trend, you believe they're going to converge, you believe they're going to help you be successful, you should go jump into it. Now then you sit back and say, great, now I've got 1 billion people using this thing called YouTube for a long period of time. How do I make money? Great, I got figured out a way to make money. But if you go with the premise of making money in the first instance, you run the risk of not being able to create user enthusiasm. And if you don't create user enthusiasm, it doesn't really matter how much you're going to charge each user.
You know, you were talking about the pace of innovation. I think one of the other critical aspects that companies like yours, governments around the world, are grappling with is the pace of regulation and the pace of innovation, and the two are not aligned. But what would companies like yours need to do? And I come back to, what's happened in the light of the revelations from Edward Snowden. And I know Larry Page has gone on record to say that we need to we need to be ready for a new world in that sense, where, yes, there is issues related to privacy and so on and so forth, but consumers need to get more used to a much more open sort of environment. And that's just what we perhaps are going to have to live with. So once again, privacy, different privacy policies around the world that companies like yours are grappling with, the needs of governments who are now, whether they're accessing your servers directly or they're forcing you to give them data. I mean, what are the challenges now for companies like yours?
I think let's parse these, because this is a really important topic, and it's important not to flippantly sort of assume that anything else is happening. First and foremost, we are not allowing any access to any government to any of our data. In every country in the world, we follow the laws, and we push back as hard as we can when we have data requests. So unless that request is made legally and we can understand why it is made and how we need to satisfy it, where we don't allow access to our data. I think the most important part in this whole conversation is user trust. And that applies to any business, by the way, going back to the notion of businesses. If the users believe you're handling their data with trust, they will come back to you and use your services. If they somehow believe that you're not treating their data in a respectful manner, in a trustworthy manner, over time, users will leave. So it's a fundamental reason why, not just for our principles, but also it makes perfect business sense to make sure that you treat that user's data with a lot of respect, a lot of care, and in the context of why and how it was provided to you. That notwithstanding, I think you're right. There is a lot of new conversations that are happening because of the existence of this data, and it is a fine balance because access to information or access to data allows us to create convenience services for you. The user will have to strike the balance between convenience and sharing data about themselves. And that's not a new problem. It's a problem we've been living with as a society.
What do you think is part of the solution from what a corporate like you can actually do in order to protect, in order to ensure that individual data is not compromised, that it aligns with government regulation, it aligns with your corporate policy, and it aligns with individual liberty as well?
Well, I think it's fair to say that if somebody out there can protect data with secure systems, we'll probably be on the top of that list of companies that knows how to handle data in large volumes and try and protect it, given the large amount of data we handle, given the large amount of servers we have around the world. In terms of, I think the conversations will continue across the various parts of society, whether it's governments, it's people, it's corporates. And I think we're going to end up in a new steady state, which is different from the steady state where we didn't have so much of data.
Yeah.
But as you hopefully understand, that we could end up with the wrong outcomes if we are not thoughtful about this.
What are you most excited about? And I know there's several things happening at Google. I talked about the automated cars in 2017. Google Loon is another project that you're extremely excited about. What would be the 2 or 3 things that are not part of the core business plan today that excite you the most?
I I think what's fascinating is that we've been talking about innovation, we've been talking about pace of innovation, and if you think back, the speed of innovation has constantly increased in the last 10 years. And the last sort of revolution in our minds, whatever happened in the internet, has caused the next set of services to be created. So the fact that there was so much data on the internet, you could have a search engine. When you had a search engine, everybody was on the internet, you could do social networking, you had bandwidth, you could do things like YouTube. So the last technological advance allowed for a whole new platform, a whole new different set of things, and now it's mobility with smartphones and OSs. Now suddenly you have devices which are beginning to talk to each other. You're seeing Android for television, Android for tablets, Android for phones, Android for your watch. So suddenly you're beginning to see devices that are going to start talking to each other. So I think this confluence of availability of ubiquitous bandwidth, the notion of different things being able to talk to each other, the
artificial intelligence,
the fact that there's so much amount of data that's out there that could all be used in a much more interesting, efficient way for society. That's crazy. I mean, things which are, you wear your Fitbit in your arm and now it starts to nag you and tell you haven't worked out. Just imagine the kinds of things you could do if you had access to data about yourself. I think, let's just say I was talking to somebody else earlier, and if you could get the collective amount of data of whoever fell sick right this minute in New Delhi, and all that data was somehow available to the doctors, every doctor you and I go to wouldn't have to second guess what could be wrong with us, because they'd have the collective wisdom of all that data around them and say, oh, there's a bit of a sort of a virus which is broken out in this part of the city, so therefore you probably have the flu or you have a cold. They don't have to second guess. We don't have to make mistakes. We can do so many things with this data, the computing power, the bandwidth, the ubiquity. So I just think we're beginning. We're just starting.
So machine learning project, I believe that's something that you've got under wraps at Google. You've done an acquisition towards beefing up the artificial intelligence side of your business, or the bet that you're making.
I don't know if it's as much of a bet as it is a necessity. If you think about it, until 2005, 5 exabytes of data was created. So if you think about it, that amount of information is being created every 2 days now. So if that's the amount of data we're going to have to handle as society, as a business, as a company, we've got to figure out more intelligent ways of being able to extract information out of the data, because data is useless without the ability to process it and create information out of it and then do something meaningful with it. So we're not going to be able to handle that data in normal ways like we have been in the past. So I think it sort of becomes a necessity to make sure we understand what to do with those large amounts of data.
Are you excited about what's happening in the Indian startup scene? We've seen companies like Facebook nibble here in the Indian market. We've seen a couple of acquisitions take place. Are you excited about what you're seeing here, especially as far as the app space is concerned?
Look, I'm a huge fan of India, big Indophile, so I'm always excited when I see technology and innovation happen in India. I wish it would happen faster. I wish we would have the ability to harness the power of the youth in this country. We'd have the ability to make sure that these application services that are being developed around the world are happening more in India as well. I think part of that has to do with our inability to scale infrastructure fast enough. I think we should have a lot more broadband users on mobile and generally in India than we have so far. But yeah, am I excited? I'm very excited about what's going on.
So where does India fit as far as Google's plans are concerned? I mean, yes, the obvious part is the users and so on and so forth. But outside of that, from a strategic point of view, where would India fit into your plans?
It's one of the most populous markets with the largest English-speaking population, with a high majority of those people being sort of young. So clearly it is a market where we want people to like our services.
A pipeline for talent for you?
I think it's everything. I think it's everything. It's a pipeline of talent. It's really, really smart people who work at Google, come from this part of the world, whether they work in California or they work over here. It's a great market for us, as you said, from an opportunity to get people to use our services. A lot of things happen in India which are being picked up and sort of used around the world. I was just talking to our team earlier, and some of the work we've done for the Indian elections is so interesting. The U.S. team says, hey, when you guys are done with your elections, can we borrow some of that stuff, because what you're doing is really interesting. And so then I say, you're right, the Indian election is a Super Bowl of elections, isn't it?
Well, since we are speaking about the Super Bowl of elections, I won't ask you to give me a sense of what you believe is going to be the election result.
That would be the least useful piece of information I could give you. Yes.
But what would you like to see from a reform point of view from the next government? Companies like yours have had run-ins with this government over things like censoring content, regulating content, for the lack of a better word, and so on and so forth. What would you like to see in terms of an agenda for change, an agenda for engagement with companies like yours from the next government?
I think that's a good question. I think if I think about it from different perspectives, clearly I'd like to see a commitment to infrastructure. because I believe that the citizens of this country deserve it. I think we all deserve it, people who grew up here or people who live here, because sort of the blueprint is out there. You can see what different countries have been able to achieve with more investment in infrastructure and their ability to grow much faster, their ability to provide a lot more sort of things to their citizens. So I think clearly a commitment to infrastructure would be important. I think from a corporate sense, I don't think we ask for much more than certainty and predictability. I think what happens is that if there is uncertainty, whether it's regulatory uncertainty, whether it's other forms of uncertainty, it creates risk. I think you have to be consistent. If you do it right, if you're consistent, you have understandable policies and procedures, you don't change your mind, you create certainty in the business environment, it allows businesses to come invest and feel that they can do this, and they can go ahead and invest in that country and build their business. If there's uncertainty and you change your mind, rules change, regulations change, depending on the form of government, the people who come into power, then things become sort of hairy. So I think that's a fair expectation any corporate's part in a large democracy.
So if I were to ask you to articulate for me the number one challenge and the number one opportunity that Google faces today. You've had a phenomenal year in 2013, at least from a stock market perspective. The stock, if I remember correctly, has run up, almost 60-odd%, crossed $1,000 for the very first time. What would you say is the number one opportunity and the number one challenge?
I think our size, scale, and relevance is both a challenge and an opportunity. It's an opportunity because we have tremendous amounts of resources at our behest. We have a great brand, we have a great bunch of people, and a great amount of services that are used by users. That's a huge opportunity. I think it is a challenge because we're a big company now, and a big company needs to be able to know how to move fast so we don't get sideswiped by some people who are sitting in a garage building the best product in the world. So I think it's both sort of double-edged sword. How do we take all the good parts of the resources we have and the scale we have and the brand we have and leverage that to create more interesting things for end users and not get caught by the fact that we're a large business? Well,
we wish you the very best of luck as you try and balance both size, scale, and innovation, and of course being relevant and not being sidestepped by two guys sitting in a garage or one guy sitting in a garage. Thanks very much, Nikesh, for speaking to us on the Forbes India show. We wish you the very best of luck, and we hope that you will update us on the exciting things that are happening at Google the next time you're in India.
Thank you very much for having me.
On that note, it's time for us to wrap up the Forbes India show. We'll see you again next week. So then from all of us here, goodbye. Many thanks for watching.